the theme of this panel, DataDao, the Unveil the value of data. So first, let's welcome Ed, the director of Web3 storage at Seagate. With over 15 years of technology experience, Ed has a proven track record of identifying marketing opportunities and transforming team into profitable revenue growth. His current focus is on Web3 market growth and ensuring the Seagate products are addressing the needs of the decentralized storage market. His areas of experience include personal computing, mobile phones, e-commerce, and various enterprise and external storage technologies through a well-rounded background in marketing, operations, and finance. Thank you, Ed, for coming. And this is Charles. I'm on my right side. He is the founder of the FIL, has over 15 years of experience in information technology and fintech industry. He brings expertise in crypto mining technologies and public relationships for team growth. Charles Tao is the ambassador of FIL and mentor of Techstar Accelerator. And we also have Gary Gao online. He's the head of FIL business of FBG, have 3 years experience in blockchain industry, 10 years plus as storage technical specialist, and worked for IBM and EMC company before. Okay, Gary, can you say hello to us?
Hello, everyone.
Yeah, good. Thank you. Thank you. We can hear you loud and clearly. Okay, so I'm going to raise my first question for three of you, because you work in different parts of the value chain. So first one is, how do you work together to build up the enormous decentralized storage system? How about we start with Ed?
Yeah, sure. It's a great question. And honestly, we spend a lot of time talking to storage providers. When this market first started happening, literally we started talking to as many storage providers as we possibly could about what they were experiencing, what types of systems they were building, what are the pains that they're experiencing, and if there's any way that Seagate could solve them. We spent a lot of time talking to Protocol Labs and a number of folks there about just echoing what we're hearing from storage providers, to the extent that there are things that we can do from a hard drive perspective, from a systems perspective, data onboarding obviously as well. How can we promote those better through into the network? So I would say a lot of it is just establishing relationships with as many people as possible, and just having open lines of communication. Slack is another very, very useful tool we found. In fact, I think I reached out to Charles the first time through Slack. Yep. Really, I think it's just really about, and it kind of speaks, I think, as well to the collaborative nature of the space, which again is something that for us at Seagate has been so eye-opening. Typically, it's when you see a new space arise, it's very competitive. One of the things that's just been so eye-opening to us has been how collaborative everyone has been in working together, whether it's storage providers, the developer community, and I think that to Protocol Labs' credit, I think they've done a huge service to this whole space in terms of how open and kind of provoking they've been to get everyone to work together. So it's been which has been incredibly awesome to see. So yeah.
Thank you. And Gary, I think you have very close cooperation with Seagate and all the hardware providers. So as a storage provider, do you have any comments about my question?
Yeah, from the theme of today's event, I understand that what you want to ask is why we invested in the construction of FIL ecosystem at the beginning. From my point of view, first of all, it's a project in the blockchain industry, and we are an investment company in blockchain industry. FIL project is one of the few projects in the blockchain field that don't focus on financial services, but provide a project that can meet the practical application needs of many people. which is also the reason why we are optimistic about this project from the financial attribute. From the perspective of product technology, I used to work in the enterprise storage industry in IBM and EMC, just like you said, and they both produce centralized storage products. In the traditional storage field, the discovery in the past few years to the popular software-defined storage cluster has been a big step from centralization to decentralization in this industry. But now we saw Filecoin trying to build a global decentralized storage to build the infrastructure of Web3. We think it's innovative enough and grand enough. We can decide to invest heavily in the ecological construction of this project. So this is my point. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Gary. And so Charles, what's your part? What's FIL1's part in this value chain?
Yeah, actually, it's a very interesting question, which brings me back to 2 years ago. So actually, we started the project and working with Filecoin back to 2020. We know Filecoin even earlier than that. In 2017, Filecoin finished the initial coin offering and raised $200 million, and we were surprising about the technology. We found IPFS is widely used in technology at that moment already. So in 2020, we know that it's going to launch. So we participated in the space race, which tested net before launching. And in that time, we were working as a storage provider. So we were the #1 in North America. So we continued growing and until the mainland launch. And during the mainland launch, we actually switched our focus. We found that other than being a storage provider, people need a software which can support the community development and developer work. So we slowed down our growth as a storage provider. We even break down the company, split the company to 2 parts. One called MBFS, which is focused on blockchain frontier solution for supported hardware. Now they have 3 data centers hosting in 3 different geolocations. On the other side, majority of the members working on provide software solutions. So provide caching services, provide data retrieval services, SDK for users and developers easily develop application on top of that. From our perspective, we believe that it's just like storage provider and first one as the layer 2 cross-chain storage solutions. The relationship is like IBM and Microsoft. So which means that storage provider is a hardware and infrastructure layer provide the devices for people be able to running their code, running their storage, save their data as a hardware layer. And on top of that, we need a strong blockchain cloud operating system, like a Microsoft Windows, to bring the use case, bring the easy-to-use experience to everybody. The target clients include both users and the users who will be able to using Filecoin as easy as Dropbox. So you'll be able to drag and upload a file without many complicated actions. For example, one-click upload, right? One-click share. And people want to know that there are a way to easily drag and drop, like the way you're using Windows and Mac. And that's why, on the other side, storage provider is geolocation distributed all over the world. We have over 5,000 nodes across the world as Filecoin. And people want to know who are the best service provider, who are be able to provide service in the region I want. For example, as Canadian user, if we want to save some data may be not allowed to cross-board. So we want to save it only in Canada storage providers. And in Europe, they have GDPR, so they want to find a user in Europe region. So this is beyond the hardware technology. It's more about how to optimize and fit the needs from customer side. So we spend millions of dollars building the software for the community use. We open source it. We're working closely with the Filecoin Foundation, Channing, Binance Labs, to building a cross-chain highway with different blockchains to enable the different community in blockchain can easily communicate with each other. Also bridging the developers from different blockchains, building a stronger ecosystem. Yeah, so that what is the first one doing. So we are working as a bridges between storage providers, users, and developers. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Impressive. So Gary, actually, here's another question for you. Could you give us some like more introduction about FBG Capital and actually your contribution to the value chain? Some details about that.
Yes. Yeah. Our role as a storage provider. We are meeting the most essential needs of this ecosystem. That is the space for storing data. And yeah, we have saved over 600 petabyte storage power till now, and we are still selling. So also in this phase, we are finding more client for the useful data for the CC and CC upgrade. For the CC upgrade, yeah, yeah, this is our role. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Just as Ed just said, the data is quite important, and so we are also very curious about, Seagate is a very great company, and you have actually a supply chain of global reach. How can you deliver all those hardwares to the world, and how do you manage your supply chain? That good?
Yeah. So well, gosh, we've been doing it for a number of years now. I mean, I think just as we've scaled out and built out, we've established a pretty solid supply chain, as well as a strong distributorship that spans the globe as well. So whatever country you're in, we've got distributors that service those markets. We, as I mentioned earlier, the Filecoin market, came without a whole lot of, I don't think any of the hard drive manufacturers or SSD manufacturers for that matter saw it coming, and it certainly caught us off guard, and we certainly, I think, ramped up as quickly as we could to try to make sure that the market was getting as many drives as it needed. But yeah, it's a pretty mature market. It's typically fairly easy to forecast. As I mentioned earlier, the core folks have built out a pretty big business, but as we kind of continue to see the edge grow, and obviously Filecoin being a big part of that, that's something that we spend a lot of time thinking about and studying. We kind of look quite a bit at what are the key indicators within the Filecoin market, some of the other edge-based segments, and try to, based on those, get a better view and anticipate what types of growths are forthcoming, and make sure that we're getting ahead of those from a forecastability perspective. So a lot of it is the infrastructure that we've put in place and the manufacturing capability, but forecasting is probably the biggest part of it, especially when you get into higher density drives, 18, 20 terabyte drives now. There are the lead times for those, because you have to test and make sure that before they leave the factory, there's certain criteria that are met, and so back in the days when you're producing 1 or 2 terabyte drives, those lead times were a lot shorter than they are now. And oh, by the way, when you kind of have kind of shocks to the forecast, it disrupts quite a bit your ability to produce those optimally. But the best way I can respond to that is that the infrastructure's in place, but forecasting continues to be something that we keeps us up at night, especially with Web3 doing what it's doing, and just making sure that we're preemptively addressing hopefully continued growth in the space. Yeah.
I believe it will grow very fast. Okay, so next question is also for you, Gary. So as a storage provider, could you give us some insight about Web3 data usage?
Okay, yeah. I think the usage of data in Web3 maybe is most likely the same as is now, just using big data analysis to make data economically valuable. But it's different from the technology owner of data will change. In Web3, your data really belongs to you. And in a decentralized world, your data will not have problem with centralization. Yeah, I think this is the most different.
Well, thank you, Gary. And also, Ed, you just mentioned something about the data with the SEAL data with the price of the fine coin, right? So, can you also give us some details? Do you have any insights about how the data usage in Web3?
Well, yeah. I mean, we clearly there's the use cases we see today, are very important, and I think I think one of the things that continues to is an opportunity, I think, for the storage provider community and just Web3 as a whole is just awareness that that you can very inexpensively, in a very secure manner, store lots and lots of data. I think that's something that I mentioned academic institutions. I think there's a number of I'll just call them institutions that have lots and lots of data that probably still today don't realize that they can back it up very inexpensively, 3 to 5 different ways, and that's something you can do now, and you could not do that 2 years ago anywhere near as inexpensively. I think that's something that's right there in front of us. That's an opportunity. I think when we look at content delivery, kind of looking at the Filecoin roadmap and kind of what's kind of coming down the pipe, that is clearly, I think, going to be a big deal, and being able to do that, good enough or well enough, if you will, is a tremendously huge opportunity. And then obviously, any kind of compute that's kind of, we were talking to Juan the other day about, data gravity and having the data sitting there and then bringing compute to the data, is a very good way of thinking about this. And again, same thing there. I mean, that it's really a matter of getting the data onto the network, and then once you've got that accomplished, then starting to kind of layer in some of the computability, some of the extra features. I talked a little bit about some of the services that storage providers have an opportunity to grow into. It's going to take time, but it's certainly something when we look at the value proposition for an end customer as to what they can do with the Filecoin network, and how inexpensive it is, and kind of how that storage providers can kind of step up into increased value propositions where they're charging more per TIB or whatever it is, for services above and beyond what are being offered today. To us is something that gets us really excited, because even rather than being 1/1000th the cost of AWS or Azure or what have you, maybe you're 1/100th, or 1/10th, which is a huge potential profitable opportunity for every storage provider involved. And that's kind of how we think about the data that's moving onto the network, and again, how vitally important it is to start continuing that momentum.
Yes, actually, so Charles, we just mentioned about like the connection with the users, like the price or the inexpensive or the decentralized storage. So, do you have any comments about that?
Yeah, that was a quite interesting topic about Web3 storage. I also get lots of questions, or can we say doubts from different industry competitors. I would like to say call them, if we can call them competitors. So some people think that, hey, you guys cannot compete with big companies because they store the data servers in big data center like AWS, Google, so quite consistency of data. People in a larger volume, so they should be cheaper. You guys are decentralized storage provider. You don't have so big capacity, so you cannot really downgrade the cost. So they don't believe that decentralized storage will be eventually cheaper than centralized storage. So this is one point. Well, it's like yes or no. And from larger scale reduce the cost, for sure it's correct. The larger scale it is, the cheaper it is, right? Because the average cost will be done. But on the other side, if we consider about decentralized storage, it's different. Also, crypto economic is different. Let me ask you one question. When AWS is running the storage, who is paying for storage? Right? It's AWS, right? But when we're doing storage provider business, who provides those servers? The storage provider. So we're actually not working like a central company, doing the investment, and when investment back, we're backed by the crypto economics. So besides the investment from crypto usage income, we also have something called block rewards. That was how Falcon does. So income comes from two parts: block rewards and the actually storage income. And because of backups, because this mechanism, nowadays, lots of storage services actually already get their investment back. And on another side, we actually working on, for example, if you think about Bitcoin or Ethereum, how many Ethereum machines currently running, and how much data they solved, is reserved. So there was millions of Ethereum mining rigs currently running in the world. And actually the data they stored is several hundred gigabyte data. If you store this data on the AWS, several hundred gigabyte of data maybe just cost you a few $100s per month. But actually people spend millions of dollars for store the data on Ethereum. Why? Because decentralizations make sure your data is not controlled by central places. Decentralization makes the account table, everything is parent for the people to trust. In code we trust. So that's why I would like to say that decentralized storage, one side can become cheaper because different vendor from different geolocations, we have a different labor resource cost, different resource cost, make it cheaper. But other than that, data is really expensive. If you store on decentralized data, you get more confidence and trust on the data. The data deserves more price. Another example is NFT, right? Let me ask you one question. How much does a Boring Ape in Web 2 as a JPEG cost? Probably $100 account per year. That's it. Now, how much is the floor price now for Boring Ape? $100,000. What's the difference? This is data on Web 3 vs data on Web 2. Data on Web 3 is expensive. And the only way to make it expensive is decentralization. That's why if we look at the Filecoin, we look at the Seagate technology, what does it provide is not something aiming at cheap. We are aiming at quality. Instead of cheap, people like quality services, right? So this is the value of Web3 data. And this is also the value of our blockchain developers, what we are working for. We're not working for cheap. We're coming here, we're working for trust. We need people trust us. We need people trust their data. And we need people trust their storage. And this is the value of the entire FIL network and also the greatest support provided by Seagate. Seagate has a global supply chain to enable everybody in the world. If you want, you can get the disk from them, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. So actually, the service we provide is not cheap, but it has a very great value, and how we're pricing it is actually like decided by the customers. And also, this is next question, Gary. Also start from you. So, what's the key areas of readiness of for Web3? I think as a storage provider, you should have those kind of insight, right?
Yeah. I think simply to say, just like the current IT architecture, the major components are storage, computing, network, and Web3 applications. I think Web3 is decentralized storage and decentralized computing, similar to now often said edge computing, just like this, and a network with wider distribution, lower latency, and greater bandwidth, and all kinds of Web3 applications. But there is also a key components. It's different with Web2. Is a perfect blockchain system can cover all of this industry, all of the IT industry. Yeah, that's my point. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Charles, do you have an idea about like which industries actually have the readiness for Web3?
Yeah, actually, I think there was a lot of discussion already about the industry can migrate to Web3. So we already see that the DeFi industry, we already see that the NFT industry, they are doing the first try, and we see like the increase of value a lot. We see like the big brands working with them. So there were so for sure, another big industry is computing network, right? Imagine like so many computers running in the world, and in different data centers, they can provide lots of good services. And actually lots of computing power actually stay idle in the data center because then company owns it. If there's no job, it just stays there. So the big market we're coming with data market. We know that some blockchain projects put the public data set for computing, like Ocean Protocol. You have public data set, and the one interesting thing happens that they have the data, but they don't have computing power. And data is stored under IPFS, and we need it stored in a better place for long-term usage. So Filecoin is a candidate. And the computing data with those powers, there was still some issues we need to overcome. For example, the privacy computing, because we needed to doing computing in secure environment. As always, data is most precious assets. People want the data running in a secure environment. So edge computing will be another way of bringing the Web3 data to usage. So in a secure environment, we know it's a trusted party. It can do the computing and hand over the result you want. This is obviously the huge market. If we look at the AWS or Google, initially they only do two things. One, storage. Two, computing. Right. That's it. Now all the other services will be created on top of that. Decentralized apps. Right. With decentralized apps, there will be something like a ENS service. So if you look at the blockchain news, you will know that in the last few months, the ENS users increase a lot. So for every 50,000, so every 50 million users, the time it takes is less and less. So with decentralized ENS, domain services, decentralized data, decentralized computing, we can see that there's an emerging market of decentralized cloud is creating. And with decentralized cloud, there are lots of opportunities. Imagine something like metaverse, right? Now people are talking about metaverse. So what is real metaverse? Running a server on AWS and only using blockchain payment. Can we create a metaverse? Who owns the data? Right, data still on AWS. That's not a real metaverse. But it's a good beginning, right? At least the payment part is not controlled by the payment gateway suite of all the blockchain, all the system, financial system, it's blockchain now. But we need to move it one step forward. Imagine today, if I want to calculate what is the future gaming industry I want, right? Ideally, the game I want to play is sandbox games. What does it mean? I put on my VR headset, I log into the server which is close to me, doing some simulation and a sandbox game. After I quit the game, it should destroy the sandbox. I don't want to leave the existence. I only want to save some data I permitted. I don't want to give all my data to the gaming company. They shouldn't own my data. They shouldn't own my skin. That's mine, right? I have the right to destroy the virtual environment, don't leave the trace. This is the future gaming industry I'm thinking. And in order to achieve this, we want to access the computing resource anywhere, which is close to me. It can be data center, it can be low latency, edge devices, and the data should exist in a decentralized way. I can fetch it from different nodes worldwide, not from Google, not AWS, forget them. They're not designed for that. They're designed for themselves, right? So this is the next big industry, computing, VR, gaming. Yeah, that's my vision.
Well, thanks. And I like the idea about the gaming thing. So anyone here in the audience or you watch the video that is in gaming industry, if you have an idea and like our idea, you can just connect Charles and we can discuss about some details. Okay, so Ed, do you have any idea on the Web3 like data user like readiness for the industries? Any insights about that?
Yeah, I think I touched on them earlier. I mean, I'm not sure if Juan presented on his triangle yesterday, but I think it's a very interesting way of looking at things from a Web3, Web2 perspective. When we first looked at it, we looked at, okay, what are, there's a whole taxonomy that IDC uses for cloud services, and we kind of went through them all to see, okay, which of these potentially are disruptible and when with Web3. And it kind of, a lot of it is, performance, security, and I mean, to us, those are kind of two of the key elements that we look at as to kind of how and when will Web3 disrupt, the currently established cloud services based off, usages of data. I think the way it's kind of been laid out as far as, we don't know when, because it's obviously going to take time, whether it's the developer community, whether it's where capacity is deployed, and some of it is, GDPR types of things where there's governance elements that are going to influence, kind of how and when these types of disruptions happen. But that's kind of how we look at it: is what are the currently established cloud services, which of those, and some of the performance-centric ones I think are going to take longer, obviously, because one of the advantages, just looking at it from a spec perspective, centralized storage has, is they've got all the compute sitting right there, and it's very centralized, and they can do that stuff really well. But as it relates to security and kind of data governance, user sovereignty, those types of things, that's where we believe that a lot of the disruption is going to happen sooner rather than later. Hopefully that answers the question. But that's kind of how we started with what's kind of the established market look like, and then when and how will these services be disrupted. And I think to the extent that that people become increasingly aware of their own data rights and ensuring that they are governing how those are disclosed or not, is going to be a huge driver as well. So I think those are some of the key things that we look at as it relates to kind of the user-driven adoption and customer-based adoption, and then obviously how that affects apps development or other elements of how Web3 will evolve.
Great. So yeah, actually I agree that all the revolution come like gradually, and everything goes step by step. We will reach there later. Yeah. Okay. So our theme today for this panel is about DataDao, unveil the value of the data. So we talk a lot about the data, and now we are going to the last but not the least question, gazing into the future of Web3. So Gary, also start from you. Can you give us some ideas about your your ideas or your dreams about the future of the Web3?
So from a point, maybe I don't know whether the future information world I imagine is called Web3 or Web4, Web5, or whether it will be called Web at that time. Yeah, that is we can really freely control our own data, and we can also use assets on the chain to freely exchange with other people or entity at any time. And at the same time, the data can be proceeded as quickly as we need. So maybe I'm a technical guy in the before, so this view is from technical side. This is my point. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. And Ed, what's your thinking about the future of Web3?
Yeah, I mean, I think I touched on it already, but it's, I think to the extent that I think GDPR is going to be a big part of how, when you start reading into that, and certainly the government element of making sure that centralized storage as we know it today, there's more ethical thought, more moral thought going into predictive marketing and just kind of some of the things that we see today and the effects it has on the teenagers, for example. I think there's all kinds of interesting studies there around the importance of making sure that that data isn't being kind of processed in a way to kind of shape thoughts or shape how people are marketed towards, or even from a cultural perspective, shaping ideologies and that type of thing. And so I think for me personally, getting to a place where there's just more objective thought, data is pushed out to the edge to the extent that users are monetized, that they have control of that destiny. Versus these big centralized companies, those are all for me. When I think about the why of Web3, those to me are very just basic, inherent thoughts as to kind of, and I think I know I'm not alone. When we first started looking at Web3, what is Web3? The Declaration of Independence and those types of things. To me, they were very basic. Okay, I think Juan talks about, this is a humanity thing. Those are all things that when you start reaching into and talking to storage providers, talking to developers, attending events like this, that it's a very common theme amongst everyone involved. And so I think that vision, we don't know exactly kind of how it's going to manifest itself. Other than the concept of user sovereignty, and just ensuring that the people are kind of able to kind of control their own destiny rather than being affected by, how they can kind of be influenced, I think is something that to me is the basic tenet of Web3. And then it just becomes a matter of letting efficient markets take over and developers doing their thing. And, just like, when the internet started happening and there was just this scramble of activity and ideas and creativity, and ultimately taking those to market is to me, I think how this is going to unfold over to me, this is like a, 2030, kind of like there's a long runway here, to me, I don't know exactly how it's going to happen, but I do know that when you see as many, creative, talented, intelligent people working towards kind of a common end, like kind of goal, that it's the chances of it succeeding are very high, to me that's kind of you can look at all the taxonomies of workloads and all these types of things, but at the end of the day, when you start kind of peeling into the passion behind this and the activity and the energy level, that's when it's kind of like, I'm a believer, and I think I know at Seagate we've got a lot of believers, and obviously there's a ton of believers in this community as well. So I'm not sure if that really answers your question, because I don't really know, other than to say that the momentum is there, and that I think a lot of people believe in kind of that notion of user sovereignty.
Correct. Actually, you answered my question. We always have a saying that people always underestimate the long run of the effective of long run technology. We cannot expect that. We don't know what will happen, but we have to believe it, right? So someday you can find out, wow, it changed my world, changed my life actually. So that is actually exactly what we are doing now. We maybe have a not very clear thinking, but we believe it. That's it. That's great. Okay, so how about Charles?
Yeah, Ed is answering pretty well. I really like your approach, and you emphasize the cooperation work with storage providers, service providers, developers, and the communities. This is a long-term journey. It's not something like Rome is not building one day. So the same as Web3, the continuous effort. There's we need lots of capital investment. We need the talent, join the community, continue the development. And there will be criticism from different places, especially the haters. It's everywhere, right? This is something like we need to hold on, and we need to keep on moving. And also about data, and that was actually like a very good point about the governance, right? The governance, also the governance of the data, the governance of the community. So some conception, good conception like a DataDao, and have a community about how to use the data, who owns the data, and how to share the revenue with the data, right? So DAO is something like we talk about a lot in the Web3 industry. There are lots of DAO organizations organized. So some DAO is designed for investment. So you just give the money or fund to organization. They have governance each, and they share the revenue. So for sure there was a lot of issues about legal, everything. But this is something new, and people are really keen to that. And also something for the data. So we know that, so we have already talked about data has a value, right? When we're talking about data storage in geolocation distributed, there's no central sovereignty about it. So how to use the data and share the value inside communities, between different communities, is a big question. So that there technology help doing that, like a snapshot. You can voting about the revenue sharing. So this is, we want to invest in this data set. For example, in deep learning, right? We have the deep learning data. There's also raw data owner. The owner has the data, but he doesn't know how to use it. You go to the machine learning scientists. They need the data, but they don't own the data. When they want to use the data, they need to pay for that, right? So how can we distribute doing the revenue sharing between the data owner, scientific user, and the end product user. After like Equipia yesterday, one of the event sponsor, they come to us. The reason they're interested in this industry because they are AI company in high accuracy maps. They have like data from the different places, cities, right? But the question for them is like, how can they incentive users collecting data for them? So then they don't need to sending using their own resource to let people to collect data for them, right? And after they get the data, how can they open the data to the community? The community doing the cloud computing for them to reduce their resource cost on their computing services. The third question is, how about the data security, right? They don't want a data leak. Some data is okay. For example, if some people take pictures and upload the data contains people's face, right? Then, if you put it on public, and everybody sees this guy is doing something in some locations without some privacy protection, like it's not good, right? So those are the problems we need to solve in Web3. But as soon as we solve it, it will be a huge market beyond the existing market. And everybody participate will be able to get some reward from it. So that's why the NFT now is very interesting. So NFT gave the content creator a way to get a revenue sharing, not decided by the broker company, agent companies, but by the smart contract. We have the requirement in the contract. We get airdrop from community building the culture, community building the value of the asset, and the community share the benefits. So this is where be the new Web3 economic and governance. That's something in my point.
Well, thank you very much. Okay, so that's all for today's questions. Do you in the audience have any questions to ask the speakers on panel? Okay, can someone deliver a microphone to them? Sorry, wait a second. Oh, mic on stage. Okay, yeah, I'm going to hand you mine.
Hey, thanks a lot. This was really cool. Very fun panel. I guess I wanted to ask, we heard a lot of the same themes kind of reiterated today than we've probably heard before around the importance of these ideals, the importance of data security, of data privacy. How do we sell this message more broad? I guess my question is, why don't people care more? It seems like the ideas around your data not being valuable, not even being yours, to monetize, to protect, is so well entrenched in all of this tech that has been built in the last 2 decades, it feels unassailable. It feels like that message just isn't getting across to the wider audience. And I'm speaking anecdotally here. My friends don't care all that much. And I'm interested, I think the ideas that we're holding and these conversations, we are all perhaps in this room agreeing with what's being said, but I feel like it's maybe not getting across more widely. And I'm interested in what we think we can do to get that message across, or if it's already happening.
Thank you for the question. So who will answer that?
Yeah, I can give my point about that. It's a very good question. I really like it. Why people nowadays care less about their data security or privacy? Actually, things is changing now. First, if we back to 5 years ago or 10 years ago, there's no GDPR, right? Facebook is not panelized. They don't necessarily change the name to Meta because they still have a good name. Now they don't have face now. They become Meta. That's a good joke. But however, it means that people is awakening now. They realize that data is important. We like to, so you maybe realize that in social media, previously, you don't even have the private message, encrypted message function. Now you see the WhatsApp, Telegram, you have end-to-end encrypted messaging. What does that mean? Your message is existing on your edge devices and it will be deleted to protect yourself. Why the device function? It's not for fun. So people is asking for that. So that means that more and more people, right? People need to be, they need to be told your data is important. Your relationship is important. Don't let those big companies misuse your data. Secondary, there was a good joke I heard yesterday about data security. Like you know that in DeFi, there were lots of DeFi hacked recently. $10 million, $100 million is stolen. And the data security expert was joking that we have become so valuable and high paid because of hackers. Without hackers, nobody thinks we are important, right? So people think it's okay to let the centralized governance get the data is because they don't realize that how big damage we are giving to you. Imagine one database, you already noticed that. One day, you heard about something like a Salesforce or whatever, the name, I don't mention those names, they have a data leak. And you receive an email from some party saying, like, hey, please you change your password, and we are resetting password. You know what that mean? When you receive email says that you need to reset the password. So most of the time, it's not because you really need to reset your password. They have data leak. Your password leaked, and your information leaked. If you go to the Google Chrome, right, you will tell that, like, hey, this is the data you save on your browser, and please change it. You already have 1,000 use account have the similar password. Please change it. Hey, why? Data leak. So people realize it. People don't fear the pain if they don't lose the money. As long as they lose the money, they fail. And it becomes more and more common in the future. And quite soon, people will change their imagination from, yes, we can give in the data, to, no, we shouldn't give the data unless I permit it. It's just a change of mind. It's just a change over the time, right? Yeah, I'm hopeful I answered your question.
Okay, one more question, and that will be end of this session. Is there any more questions here?
Just to get a clear understanding of, so you're saying that Filecoin is cheaper, faster, and unlimited. Is there any drawbacks, like blockchain is permanent and you can't delete it? Can you delete what you put on Filecoin? And what are the downsides of using it?
I'm not sure I'm the best person to answer it. So there's so many Filecoin experts here. So, Ed, do you want to add something on this?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that clearly today performance is something that is not where it is. Filecoin lacks performance compared to what's offered by AWS, Azure, and I think that doesn't surprise anyone, right? So that's I think a downside. But you take that aside, I mean, and a lot of how enterprise works and how consumer works is about what's the right fit application for what you're intending to do. And there's no question that just looking at Wikipedia, I mean, there's so many instances where there's vast troves of data that need to be backed up several times over as inexpensively as possible. And so those are, that example, and there's oodles of other ones like that, are the ones that right now are just absolute no-brainers for the use for Filecoin. Over time, and that's kind of the chart I showed as far as disruption goes, it's going to get nearer and nearer. I think there's going to be, so I've worked on both SSDs and hard drives in my life. And it was so funny to hear the SSD and the NAND world talk about how HDDs they'll be gone by 2020, and those two technologies are incredibly symbiotic. I think Web 3 and Web 2 will have a similar type of relationship where Web 3 will continue to grow and it will exceed, its growth rate will exceed Web 2. But the two will coexist very much, in the back half of this decade. And because there's going to be best fit applications for each. That's kind of, I don't think one's going to take over the other. But I do think that the question that was asked earlier, I think there is, and it's interesting too, because I think the younger generation, meaning teenagers, I think those are the generation that are, we don't realize it, but hyper aware of kind of the importance of their personal data. And so I think the awareness element that Charles was addressing is something that that also will take time, especially as things get more and more advanced and predictive. And I think everyone goes through these like realizations in their life where like, wait a second, how did they know that I was interested in a Raptors jersey? Oh, maybe it was, they overheard like, those types of awarenesses are like when you're like, wait a second, that's not okay. I guess to answer your question, I think it's there's just going to be big pockets of opportunity that are going to be addressed by both markets, and like I said, I think they'll coexist absolutely at least through the end of this decade.
Yeah, and
I'm not sure if that answers your question, but
yeah. Second point would be, isn't the point of decentralization is bringing the power back to the people? We don't want to have government overreach. We don't want to have corporate overreach. We don't want to have all these other parties determining what we do with the data. So why do we look into GDPR, and why are we trying to add more blocks in the way? Shouldn't we opening everything up to anyone to do anything from anywhere?
Yeah, I think I can, if I'm understanding correctly, your question is, if data is decentralized, anybody can access, why we should have GDPR protect the data, right? Is that your question? That's a very good question, honestly. It's actually, this is also like in Filecoin node, why we need a widely geo-distributed Filecoin node. So, there are a lot of storage providers in Asia, in Europe, in Canada, in US. So in GDPR, decentralized storage is not a conflict with GDPR, first of all. And when you store the data, you have the right to do encryption. You can to make sure like you only store in the storage provider in this region. And also, Filecoin is something ongoing under development. It's not something is developed and no changes. So, limit of access, limit of retrieval, IP constrained access, those are the FIP, Filecoin Improvement Proposal, in discussion. It can be added if the community agrees that we should have some level of controls of regions to fit the local government requirement. Imagine if you really want some data stored outside of Europe governance, the answer is simple. Don't store it in Europe, right? If you don't really want those governance by Europe, why you store it in Europe, right? However, this is the place Filecoin is better than AWS. If you want the data stored, not covered by US rules, but you store it on AWS, unfortunately, you are still under the US governance. You know why? Because AWS or Amazon is a US company. So it's under the US governance. Even though you store on the place outside of US, you are still under the US governance, But with Filecoin, you don't have this worry. These storage providers belong to each country. You only need to compatible with local governance. Your data in China only compatible with China's law. Your data in Africa is only compatible with Africa law. Filecoin is a decentralized code-based structure organization. So you cannot do instructions on Filecoin. It doesn't work. This is the beauty of the decentralization. So as I said, protect your data, governance, and decentralized is not conflict. Actually, like they're in kind of harmony together. I hope I answered the question.
Thank you very much. And as Charles just said, we have a lot of actually Filecoin experts here in the audience. So anyone is going to have some comments here? Oh, okay. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, no, it's a great question, and I'm happy to kind of speak to it because I think it's important to get a nice concrete answer too. If Filecoin is strictly better in every way, then there's no reason for us to be here. We've done our jobs and we should all go home. So kind of going from the tangible to the intangible, number one, time to liveness. Your data will take somewhere between 45 minutes to 8 hours to go live on Filecoin today. That is an obvious scope for improvement there. Number two, retrieval, while it works, is unpredictable today. There's a lot of scope for making retrieval more robust and a lot of work actively happening right now on that stream. So the ability to easily and predictably retrieve your data back. Number three, and this kind of moves away from the tech itself, but there is, as far as I know at least, not a lot, if any, tooling that will encrypt your data for you before storing it on Filecoin. And so that's an obvious hindrance to the adoptability of Filecoin. Number four, I think because there are so many different use cases, there's a lot of tooling popping up that helps you store your data on Filecoin depending on the use case that you have in mind, whether you want something very long-lived or you want to store a lot of small files for a short period of time and so on. But as a result of that today, there's no clear answer for what the right place to start if you want to store data on Filecoin is. Is there a single tool that you use? I can tell you, working on the Lotus team, that answer should not be start with the Lotus implementation of Filecoin. It should be some tool, but there's a whole bunch of options. And number five, I guess, and least tangibly and the most hand-wavy, is there is a reputational aspect as well, where it'll take time before reputationally Filecoin is as trusted and believed as any of our competitors in the Web2 space. So I think that is where the work lies. That is where the work is certainly happening, as I know we've heard already and will continue to hear. But those are the obstacles that remain to be solved, I think, at least in my opinion.
Thank you very much. Yeah, actually we have a panel with audience and the panelists. Okay. So that's the end of today's session. So the theme of this panel, again, I'm going to say it, sorry. DataDao, the Unveil the value of data. And let's thank again about all our panelists. Gary Gao from online, Charles, Tao, and Ed Strong. Thank you very much.